Hello students, welcome to the session of Edunguru. I am Dr. Pankaj Kumar, your biology teacher. In this session, we will be discussing about the types of protist, right? Protist can be divided into three categories, that is a plant protist, Jew protist or the fungal protist, okay? So in that series, we are just going to start the plant protist. And as per your syllabus, in the plant protist, we are supposed to discuss two species. One is the dinoflagellates and second is the diatoms, okay? Let me tell you the way in which all these groups need to be read. First, whenever we talk about, we need to talk about the habitat, okay, where that particular species exists. So we need to talk about the first thing, habitat. The second thing, we should talk about the cellular structure. What is the cell structure? What is the cell wall? Second, is there any specific thing that is present inside the cell? Then we have to discuss it, okay. And the third category you can keep that what are the specific types that you can associate with that particular species, or we can say the unique feature, okay. And finally, the reproduction followed by their economic importance. So these are the broad points in which this entire lower groups or the species of diversity need to be kept in your mind, okay. So we will also follow the same things, right. So the first thing first, we will discuss about the habitat. So let's talk about the habitat of dinoflagellates. We know very well it is aquatic. Dinoflagellate, that means two flagella. So naturally it has to be aquatic. Now again the question is the nature of aquatic, whether it is a freshwater or marine water, right? And the answer is that it occurs in both, but primarily it is a marine in nature. So primarily it occurs in seawater. You know, dinoflagellates are among those plant species which constitute the largest contributor towards the phytoplanktons. I am sure you might have read earlier or somewhere in the other chapter as well that the biggest photosynthesizers in our world is the phytoplanktons. And among the phytoplanktons, the major player is the dinoflagellates. So that's why, it plays a very, very critical role in contributing oxygen to our atmosphere, okay. So the habitat is the marine. Now, the second thing what we'll talk about, the cell. We are studying the protist, so naturally the cell is unicellular and it is a eukaryote. So let's talk about first of all that what are the nature of the cell wall. We will start from outside of the cell, right. So what is the cell wall? Cell wall is made up of cellulose, right, but in cellulose there is a deposition of a substances called pectin, right. And since pectin is deposited and that is sculptured in different manner, so sometimes it is also called as a armored flagellate. Why we are calling armor? Because pectin is actually covering the entire cell, right. So that's why it is also known as armored flagellate, okay. Now if you see the entire structure, this entire structure has a two groove, right, as you can see in the diagram also. So I'm just drawing a rough diagram for you. Suppose this is a cell, right. So in cell there is a two groove, okay. So I'm just drawing, one is the longitudinal groove and second is the transverse groove, okay. So what is the name of the longitudinal groove? If you talk about the longitudinal groove, the name of the longitudinal groove is the sulcus. So this is the sulcus, okay. And as far as the transverse groove is concerned, what we call annulus, and it is also known by another name what we call cingulum, okay. Now both these grooves actually have one flagella. You can see there what I am drawing for you. So there are two flagella, right. So since there are two flagella, that's why we are calling them dinoflagellates, understood. So these two flagella actually help them in the flotation, right. So this is what we call dinoflagellates. we have discussed about the cell wall, we have discussed about the armored flagellate that is over there. Now just come inside the cell, and in the inside the cell, the very first things we need to discuss the photosynthetic pigments. After all, they are a part of algae, isn't it? You know, when we will discuss the chapter of algae, you see, there are as many as 11 algal groups, right? And the criteria on which these algal groups are divided is actually the photosynthetic pigments, right? So here also a very specific photosynthetic pigments. So on that particular basis, it has been assigned a separate or what we call golden brown algae. Okay. This golden brown algae, due to its very specific photosynthetic pigments, has been assigned a very separate group. Okay. As far as the group is concerned, what we say that basically it belongs to the class Dinophyceae of the phylum Pyrophyta, right? Now, let's talk about the exact photosynthetic pigments. Now, what are they? They are chlorophyll A. You know, chlorophyll A is a universal pigment, so that has to be there. Besides chlorophyll, the specific pigment that is there is the chlorophyll C, right? And then mind it, it is a alpha carotene. So that is very important, and number of times this particular questions has been asked in competitive examinations, right? There is a alpha carotene that occurs in the dinoflagellates, okay? And in addition to alpha carotene, there is a phycobilins, okay? So there are different types of phycobilins also over there, right? So now the moment we talk about the photosynthetic pigment, the next logical question is that in what form the food is stored. Now here I would like to give you a very simple concept, and the concept is that whenever you see that photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll B, by default the food is stored in the form of starch. I repeat, whenever you see chlorophyll B, by default the food is stored in the form of starch, okay? And whenever you see chlorophyll C, by default the food is stored in the form of one or other form of oil, okay? So here also one or other form of oil is there. Now here I would like to add one more thing. In many of the books you might see that in other chlorophyll C some starch is also there, but mind it, that is not a true starch. That starch are more closer to the lipids or oils, okay? Now let's discuss the food is stored in case of the dinoflagellates. In case of dinoflagellates, the food will be stored in the form of oil, right? Now let's discuss some very unique things that is associated with the dinoflagellates, okay? And one of the unique thing that is associated with the dinoflagellates is its nucleus. I am sure we know, all of you might have discussed or might have read about the two types of cells, right? That is the prokaryote cell and the eukaryote cell. Do you know there is yet another cell that is in between prokaryote and eukaryote, and what we call mesokaryote, right? And this is a perfect example of mesokaryote, okay? You see, we can differentiate mesokaryon on the basis of the nucleus. As the name suggests, mesokaryon, so by default it has to be in between prokaryote and eukaryote. That means it has some features that is similar to the prokaryote and some features that is similar to the eukaryote, right? Now, what are the features that is common to prokaryote? The features is unorganized chromosome, right? Because you know very well that in case of prokaryote also, we do not have a true chromosome, right? The histone is absent over there. Similarly, in case of dinoflagellates also, the true chromosome is not there and histone proteins are not there. So we can say that the chromosome is not organized, right? But on contrary, what are the eukaryotic features? The eukaryotic features are the presence of, first of all, the presence of the nucleus is there. Second, all the membrane bound organelles are there, like mitochondria, Golgi body, lysosomes, everything is there. In that way, we can differentiate the mesokaryon with reference to eukaryon and the prokaryon, right? So the character for dinoflagellates is that they have a nucleus equivalent to the mesokaryon. And as I told you, the features for the mesokaryon is that they have an unorganized chromosome, and another unique feature is that whenever the cell division is going to happen, the nuclear membrane doesn't disappear, it remains intact. And second, the nucleolus also doesn't disappear, rather it remains intact. So this is the another feature for the mesokaryon. Or sometimes dinoflagellates are also called as a connecting link between the prokaryote and eukaryote. So in the course of developments, as we know that as the evolution proceeds, right, the very first was your prokaryote, and in course of development, what happens that the prokaryote develop into mesokaryote, and eventually the mesokaryote develop into eukaryote. This is one of the hypotheses that is usually discussed among the scientific communities. So this is all as far as the mesokaryon is concerned, right? Now let's talk about some of the another very unique features associated with the dinoflagellates. Any idea about the phenomena called red tide? I'm sure all of you might have read about it in your usual common knowledge. Now, the phenomena of red tide, of course, as the name suggests, the tide become red color. That is why it is a red tide. Okay. Now, what could be the reason behind making the color of tide as a red? And the reason lies in there are few species of dinoflagellates that are primarily responsible for the phenomena called red tide. Okay, and those species are Gymnodium and Gonialax. Right. So please remember these two names that is often asked in competitive examinations. That is Gymnodium and Gonialax. So it makes the tide red, and these are responsible for the red tide phenomena. Okay. Right. And whenever I discuss this red tide phenomena, I often asked, there are three correlations, right? For instance, there are three phenomena like red tide, red sea, red snow. Okay, all these three are red, right? Can you tell me what could be the reason behind that? Of course, I gave you the answer for the red tide. But what about the red sea? And what about the red snow? So what are the species that are responsible for making the red sea red, making the snow colored as a red? Can anybody just tell me? Anybody? Well, you will be surprised that the reason for the redness of red sea is not red algae, rather it is a blue-green algae. Okay, the name of the blue-green algae, what we call Trichodesmium erythraeum, right? So that is the algae that is responsible for making red sea red. Okay, and if you ask that why the blue-green algae is making the red sea red, the reason is very simple. So any color is a function of the pigments, right? And what are the pigments? The pigments are what we call phycoerythrin, right? So phycoerythrin is actually red in color, and they have a large number of phycoerythrin. So that actually makes the red, the red sea as a red. Now the last one what we call red snow, you know. The reason behind the redness of the red snow, what exactly it is one spore, and that is hypnospore, okay, and hypnospore of Chlamydomonas, right. So once again I just repeat, red tide, that is Gymnodium and Gonialax, red sea, Trichodesmium erythraeum, a blue-green algae, and red snow, that is Chlamydomonas, that is a green algae. So these are responsible for three famous red phenomena. Okay, right. So we were just discussing about dinoflagellates. In case of dinoflagellates, we have discussed the red tide phenomena. Okay. Now there is one more important thing that is observed in case of dinoflagella. Now all of you in your childhood might have seen the insects with a light, glowing light. In Hindi we call it jugnu. I don't know in other language what we call it, right? So can you tell me what is the reason for the light of that jugnu? What could be the reason behind that? Can any one of you just tell me that which chemical is responsible for making the light, and that particular phenomena what we call bioluminescence. So what is the reason behind the bioluminescence? The reason behind the bioluminescence is the presence of one chemical what we call luciferin. So what happens when luciferin comes in contact with the oxygen, it oxidizes, it burns, and as a result of burning it emits light. Okay, so that is the reason behind that the bioluminescence. But besides that, insects, dinoflagellates also shows the phenomena of bioluminescence. It is not all dinoflagellates. There are certain species of dinoflagellates that shows the phenomena of bioluminescence. And since they have a presence in a sea, so often in a sea, the phenomena of the night phosphorescence or what we call bioluminescence is observed, and that species is a Noctiluca. So Noctiluca is a species that shows a phenomena of bioluminescence, right? So we have discussed two things. One, as I told you, everything I am discussing within the bracket of some unique features. So red tide was a unique features, the bioluminescence was a unique features, right? One more, and one more is the production of certain toxic material. The dinoflagellates also produce certain toxic material. Okay, when dinoflagellates are large in number, what actually they do? They produce a toxin called saxitoxin. Now what is the ill effect of saxitoxin? What happens? This toxic material is actually get accumulated in a fish, primarily the shellfish. Okay, and when humans feed on those fish, the saxitoxin gets accumulated in our body. And when it is accumulated in our body, our nervous system actually get impaired. Okay, so that is the ill effect of saxitoxin. And the name of the disease, what we call PSP disease, that is paralytic cell poisoning disease. Okay, that is the disease that is observed in even in some case fish also. So that is one of the ill effect of the dinoflagellates. Okay. So finally, let's talk about the reproduction, that how dinoflagellate reproduce. Okay. As far as the reproduction is concerned, they reproduce both by asexually as well as sexually. Okay, and asexual reproduction mainly occur through either through fission or through some spore formation, right? But as far as the sexual reproduction is concerned, the sexual reproduction being a protist, we know very well, it is going to be absolutely either isogamous or anisogamous. In the very beginning, when we were discussing about the general feature of protist, we have already discussed that in the entire protist, the reproduction can be either the isogamous or anisogamous. So both type of reproduction is actually present in case of dinoflagellates, right? But if you talk about the life cycle, the unique thing is that the life cycle is always haplontic. We have also discussed the haplontic life cycle. So what it means? It means that primarily dinoflagellates are haploid in nature, and they are also characterized by zygotic meiosis. So zygote is going to divide, and as a result of meiosis, what will happen? The gametes will form, syngamy will occur, and finally the main plant is going to be restored, as we have discussed in the introduction of protist. So we have discussed this particular things in detail over there. So the haplontic life cycle is a key as far as dinoflagellates is concerned, and as far as the type of reproduction is concerned, we will always say they primarily reproduce by the zygotic meiosis. So these are the two things in the section of reproduction we have to discuss. Now coming back to the last sections, and the last section is what we call, that is the economic importance. What is the importance of dinoflagellate? Why we should read it? Okay, very simple. In the very beginning I told you, dinoflagellates are the biggest contributor of oxygen to this world. They are one of the prime part of the phytoplanktons, right? So that's why they have a great economic importance. Okay. And number two, there are certain species that actually feed on dinoflagellates as well. Not the major one, but yes, it is also going to act as a feeding material for certain animals as well. Okay. So these are the two most important significance of the dinoflagellates. So we have discussed about dinoflagellates, and before we conclude, just one point that you have to keep in mind, their significance in terms of the mesokaryon. That is the key what you have to keep in your mind, right? So, see you in the next sessions. We will be discussing about the diatoms. So, do join me after going through the very session of diatoms, right? Thank you. In this module, we have learned dinoflagellates are phytoplankton. Life cycle in dinoflagellates is haplontic. Dinoflagellates shows phenomena of red tide and night phosphorescence. Dinoflagellates produces saxitoxin which causes PSP disease. To watch the next video, please attempt the following questions. Question number 1. Red tide phenomena is shown by option A, diatoms, option B, nostoc, option C, gymnodium, option D, physarum. Question number 2. Mesokaryon is observed in option A, euglena, option B, slime mold, option C, dinoflagellate, option D, diatoms. Question number 3. Toxic chemical released by dinoflagellates is known as option A, neurotoxin, option B, saxitoxin, option C, dinotoxin, option D, ribotoxin.